Start again.
Hang on.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the October 7th, 2021 meeting of the Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals. My name is Bruce Forster. I'm the chairperson of the Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals, and I call this meeting of the Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Present. Thank you. Next part of the business, is there a motion to approve the last meeting's minute and a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Old business, there is none. So tonight we will begin the public hearing for South Dixon Solar. Petition number 21-P-1566, known as the South Dixon Solar application for an Ag 1 special use permits to construct a ground-mounted solar energy system in Lee County as part of a solar energy conversion system. Second thing I want to say, I'm here and chairing the meeting. However, I want everybody to know ahead of time that I will be abstaining from voting on this petition. Next thing is, as contemplated by the Lee County Ordinance and our own rules of procedure, I will now entertain a motion to appoint retired Judge Tim Slavin as our facilitator for the duration of this hearing.
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I will now turn the hearing over to our facilitator, Tim Slavin, with whom we have independently contracted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Lee County ZBA. Welcome and good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is healthy, remaining safe. As you heard, my name is Tim Slavin, and I'm a retired circuit judge engaged as an independent contractor to what is called facilitate this hearing. I have no adjudicatory responsibilities. I am not for or against any particular position. I am a neutral. I am here, however, hopefully to add some process, organization, efficiency, and flow to these proceedings. This is indeed South Dixon Solar LLC's petition, Lee County number 21-P-1566, for a special use permit to develop a proposed solar energy system, the acronym SES, in South Dixon Township here in the county. As shown by certificates of publication, notice of this hearing was published in the Dixon Telegraph on September 21st of this year. Notices to adjoining property owners have also been provided. First of all, hoping you understand, a notable portion of what remains of tonight's Zoning Board of Appeals session will be taken up by organizational matters as we set some ground rules, do some preliminary scheduling, and quite frankly, work through any technical and practical protocols we have planned to accommodate everyone, but keeping you all reasonably safe at the same time. Initially, because of the unique circumstances visited upon us, courtesy of COVID-19 and its variations, which has resulted in variations and the increase in positivity testing rate, which has resulted in a governor's executive order, all in this hearing room are required to wear masks except when speaking. In addition to this former courtroom, there is a space in the rear former jury deliberation room where any attendees can watch, listen, and participate in the proceedings on the Zoom remote video conferencing platform. So feel free to go back there if you don't feel safe in here. I hope all this makes everyone feel medically comfortable. If not, one can also participate from your home or other remote location on that Zoom platform, or While not being able to participate, one can watch and listen to us on YouTube. D. Duffy has gone to extraordinary lengths to advertise and post the Zoom entry and YouTube technical information, but it never hurts to repeat such things. The Zoom meeting ID tonight and going forward is 915-3923-9154. And the password is 209840. The Zoom platform allows an interested party to actually participate. It is an interactive platform. One may not only see and hear what is taking place, but when the appropriate stage comes, one may ask a witness questions, call a witness, testify, or give a closing comment, all on the Zoom platform where everyone can hear and see. Further, in an attempt to be as transparent and inclusive as possible, we are also streaming this proceedings on YouTube. However, YouTube is not an interactive platform. On it, one can only watch and hear what is being said during the hearing, but not participate in it. As to YouTube, on your computer or cell phone, use your browser, go to www.youtube.com. In the search bar, type Lee County IL, Zoning Board of Appeals. There's no need to be concerned with upper or lowercase letters. This should bring up a list of Lee County ZBA YouTubes. Input or select today's date, October 7th, 2021, and voila, you should be seeing us here in the hearing room. However, please be advised that this YouTube feed will, because of those ubiquitous cyberspace thingies, have a short real-time delay. In case you are not a techno geek and get lost in all this, for assistance with any of these machinations, you may call Ms. Duffy's technical helpline, 815-973-3449. I'll repeat that, 815-973-3449. I'm sure we all appreciate the protocols developed by the incredibly hardworking D. Duffy and the expertise of Lee County's IT department and its ancillary right hand, Zach, to allow these proceedings to even take place, particularly with so much accommodation given the circumstances. Now, for a bit more substance, as I have alluded, there are two groupings of attendees at this Zoning Board of Appeals as this Zoning Board of Appeals hearing moves forward. One bunch I will refer to as necessaries. These are people who must, as a practical matter, attend this hearing in person. They consist of your hardworking, practically volunteer Zoning Board of Appeals members, Ms. Duffy, your county's outstanding zoning officer, our renewable energy, Lee County's renewable energy coordinator, Alice, petitioner's attorneys, Courtney Kennedy and Kyle Berry, your adroit state's attorney, Charlie Boonstra, of course, at any given time, a witness, himself, and finally, hardly but least, our hardworking and skilled court reporter, Callie. The other group I will call interested parties. These are those of you folks who are with us either in building or remotely on Zoom or YouTube, because you simply want to observe your county government at work, or beyond that, you have a particular interest in these proceedings. The next process I will try to explain is the process for these interested parties to participate. I emphasize, please, please know that everyone will have that opportunity, but for everyone's benefit, I want to provide the opportunity to participate in a manner that is as orderly and as efficient as possible. However, because of the necessary electronic filtering through Zoom, my usual process becomes even more central, and I will flesh out more of this further in my presentation tonight as we move through our time together in the weeks ahead. There are many possible reasons for an interested party's appearance this evening and during subsequent sessions, whether in person or remotely. You could be a member of the public who is joining us simply as a citizen and spectator. You could be a member of the public who wants to be heard. This does not necessarily mean someone who is absolutely for or absolutely against the requested special use, but someone who wants to participate. If you are such a person, you will fall into any one or more three subcategories. One, you want to give testimony. This means you desire, under oath, to have you or a witness of your calling testify to facts relevant to the board's eventual decision. That is not the time to describe your feelings or announce your opinion, but to aver facts, and you are subject to cross-examination. Everyone so wishing to testify will be given one opportunity to do so. Secondly, you are a person, an interested party who wants to be able to cross-examine witnesses. But please, that is just the time to ask questions of a particular witness, not to argue with him or her, and not to give your own speech. Everyone so wishing to cross-examine a witness will be given one opportunity to cross-examine each and every witness. Thirdly, you could be a person who wants to make a closing statement or a public comment. That is your opportunity to give a speech, to tell the board how you feel, or give them your opinion based on the facts adduced during the whole hearing process as to what the ZBA's decision should be. During this closing statement or speech stage, one cannot allege new facts. When you think about it, the reason for that is simple. The two most important parts of adducing the truth of matters at a hearing are missing when you give a closing public comment. You're not under oath, nor are you subject to cross-examination. Everyone wishing to give a closing statement will be given one opportunity to do so. For those of you joining us on the Zoom platform this evening or in the future, that interactive software allows an interested party to indicate a desire, when the time comes, to ask questions of witnesses, to present one's own testimony, or to give a closing statement or a public comment. So when I indicate the time has come to begin one of those interested party stages, I will ask for participation from the Zoomers, whether they're here in the old courthouse or at a more remote location. If one is video conferencing, simply click on the icon at the bottom center of the Zoom screen labeled Participants. And from the options that then appear, click on the one that says Raise Hand. If one is remotely teleconferencing, in other words, not using the video, while remaining connected, you should hit the star or asterisk symbol and then the Arabic numeral number 9 on your phone. Either way, we should then see raised hands, and I will call on each raised hands. However, we won't be able to do so on a first raised, first come basis. So calling on the raised hands will probably be more random, referring to name, email address, or the last 4 digits of a phone number that appear on our display here in the courtroom. Written communications sent in advance of this hearing or any written material intended as something for the board to consider is subject to Board Rule Article 5, Section 12, that 8 copies be provided. Any communications received that do not comply with this requirement may not be considered by the board. There's another substantive matter that should be addressed at the beginning in order to make sure that all are on the same page. On May 6th of this year, after having been not successful at the county board level the prior year, South Dixon Solar filed a new petition for a special use. On July 21st, as they are certainly permitted to do, South Dixon Solar filed a petition which amended their May 1st one. Then, that evening, the Lee County Board passed a new ordinance relating to the solar energy systems. It is the considered opinion of the legal beagles involved in this matter that at the core, the operative ordinance, which first the ZBA and then the county board should judge the merits of the amended petition, is the ordinance in effect at the time the new but original petition was filed on May 6, 2021. I will now review the chronological progress of the hearing. I know that this narration is really boring and tedious, but please, reciting it's for everyone to help you feel comfortable and not worry that you will not have a fair and complete opportunity to participate. But at the same time, to alert you when the three distinct opportunity forms of participation will be present. The applicant, South Dixon Solar LLC, has the burden of initially going forward. Accordingly, its agent or attorney may first make opening remarks. Then the applicant presents evidence, one witness or one document at a time. I will place each witness under oath or affirmation. Excuse me. After each applicant witness, the state's attorney, the zoning officer, the members of the ZBA first, Alice, the renewable energy coordinator, and then interested parties, both on-site and remote, have the opportunity to cross-examine. And please, that is just the time for questions directed to the witness testifying. After the completion of the applicant's evidence, the zoning officer has the opportunity to present witnesses and documents, and I will place any such of her witnesses under oath. After any zoning officer witness, first the petitioner, then the state's attorney, then members of the ZBA, and then interested parties, both on-site and remote, have the opportunity to cross-examine those witnesses. And once again, please, that's just the time for questions directed to the witness testifying under oath. After the applicant and zoning officer have presented their respective evidence, then interested parties may present any witnesses, including themselves, or document one at a time. I will place each such witness under oath or affirmation. After each interested party witness, the applicant, the state's attorney, the zoning officer, the renewable energy coordinator, members of the ZBA, and then other interested parties have the opportunity to cross-examine each of those interested parties' witnesses. Then the applicant may offer rebuttal witnesses or documents should the applicant choose to do so. I will place each such witness under oath or affirmation, and the same questioning process ensues. If the applicant does present any rebuttal witnesses, interested parties, Ms. Duffy, may present surrebuttal witnesses one at a time, and we'll go around the horn again. Finally, the applicant is given the initial opportunity for closing remarks, and then any interested parties will be given opportunity for closing statements, public comments, speeches, whatever term you prefer. All of this is simply a process designed to give all a chance to be heard in a thorough but orderly fashion. There are some minor sub-rules, after which I promise that I will be finished boring you any further. Each session has a time limit under the zoning board rules of 2.5 hours. However, we certainly don't want to cut off anybody right in the middle of something, so I will certainly make a reasonable effort to let someone finish a particular stage when the time limit has been reached. Or if there's very little time remaining at the end of a stage, I may simply continue the session rather than starting on another stage. I also have, for everyone's benefit, the discretion to call for short recesses. Under the zoning board rules, I have the duty to rule on the admissibility of evidence. While the strict judicial rules of evidence do not apply, I will exercise some equitable control of what is being presented with or without an objection. We do and will continue to have a court reporter taking down what is said during these proceedings. I ask all to be mindful of her job, please. She cannot take down two people talking at once. She cannot take down nodding heads or gestures. And while I happen to know, having worked with her a few years now, she's very skilled. There is a limit to how fast a person can talk, including yours truly, and expect her to keep up. So please be respectful of her job. I do please ask for civility and decorum. This is certainly a public forum, but please be respectful of all those who consider it important enough to be here. I ask everyone to refrain from displays of approval or disapproval. And as now with all public gatherings, I request that you either turn off your cell phones or at least put them on silent. Lastly, your zoning board of appeals, these fine, hardworking, and practically volunteer gentlemen act as finders of fact. much akin to a jury in that role. Their decisions during the last stage of the proceedings, findings of facts, and recommendations are based on sworn testimony, admitted exhibits, and closing statements they receive during the hearing process. These guys are your friends, your neighbors, your fellow citizens of Lee County. So please appreciate and respect their role as we move through the days and weeks ahead. I ask you not to put them in a compromised position by lobbying them or having extra hearing conversations or correspondence until the entire hearing, including their decisions, have been completed. In fact, they've been instructed to avoid these appearances of not impropriety by politely telling an interested party something like, "I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to discuss the matter until the ZBA's work of finding in facts and making recommendations is completed." Thank you for your kind understanding in all of these regards. All right. Something a little quicker. We'll move to the roll call beyond the ZBA. Ms. Reporter, I will note the presence of, besides the 5 noted members of the ZBA, of Zoning Officer Duffy, Renewable Energy Coordinator Henkel, State's Attorney Boonstra, Attorney for the Petitioner Courtney Kennedy, IT Zach, of course yourself, and myself. And in the courtroom are approximately 4, 9, 14, something like 18, no, 17, 18, yeah. 18, 19 people, interested parties appear otherwise, and we're glad they're here. All right, now for the really boring part. We're now going to work on available dates down the road. I have gotten from Alice a list of days that the courtroom is not available or that there are county board or committee meetings. I have, of course, my own schedule. We're now going to work on what I call available dates. These are not the dates certain in the future when we will be reconvene. Well, the dates to which a recess will apply. I just want to get a landscape of what we have available and sort of manage things from there. I will certainly at the end of every evening's session announce with certainty what the next session date will be. So let's get started and just indicate yes or no. Availability, Mr. Burrow, October 12th, Tuesday, October 12th.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Henkel.
Yes.
Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. Zach. And I'm a yes. All right. Thursday, October 14th. Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. We're going to do that after him. Ms. Henkel. We're working on Thursday, the 14th. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. Jack. Okay. Very good. Okay. All right. I won't. All right. Monday, the 18th. Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Mr. Burrow.
No.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
No.
Okay. I think that takes care of that one. Tuesday, the 19th. Mr. Forster. Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
No.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Henkel. Mr. Boonstra, Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. And I am. I'm going to do about 8 and we'll leave it at that. Wednesday, the 27th. Wednesday, the 27th. Mr. Forster. Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Hinkle. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. And I am. Okay. Monday, November 1st. Mr. Forster. Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Hinkle. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. Okay. We're getting there. Wednesday, the 3rd of November. Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
No.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Hinkle. Mr. Boonstra. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. One more. Thursday, the 4th. Mr. Forster. Mr. Burrow.
Yes.
Mr. Bothy.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Meyer.
Yes.
Ms. Duffy. Ms. Hinkle. Mr. Boonstra. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kelly. Okay. That's enough for right now. That gives us at least a sort of a landscape. Thank you, everybody. All right. Now I'm finished talking, thank heavens. Ms. Kennedy, the burden, like I said, on the petitioner to go forward is on you, and you may, if you wish, give an opening statement. If not, call a witness. Oh, I told you what I'd do and then I didn't do it, right? Gentlemen of the ZBA, is 6 o'clock okay on nights moving forward? Let me put it this way. Does anybody object? Everybody's got their head down. Either they're unhappy or happy, but 6 o'clock. Okay, everybody. All right. And that's okay with you, Mr. Boonstra, Alice, D. Okay with IT, Zach? Okay. I'll try and remember to say it at the end of every night, but 6 sessions from now on will begin at 6. Okay, sorry about that. All right, back to you, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone being here tonight. As Judge Slavin noted, my name is Courtney Kennedy, and I serve as local counsel for the applicant, in this case, South Dixon Solar LLC. As you all may know, this is not the first time that the applicant has appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals with respect to this South Dixon project. It's my understanding that South Dixon Solar previously appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Lee County Board seeking a special use permit to construct and operate a 500 megawatt solar farm located in South Dixon Township in Lee County. Ultimately, the applicant's request for a special use permit was denied by the county board. And I believe it goes without saying that the county board's denial was a setback for the applicant. And I think we can all agree that setbacks can be very painful and generally not very pleasant to work through. And that's if you opt to work through it. Because really you have two choices when you reach a setback. You can give up, or you can regroup, reconfigure, adjust, and try again. And that's exactly why we're here tonight. South Dixon Solar chose to learn from its setback and change how it went about this project generally. So that invites the next question. What exactly has changed? Since South Dixon appeared before the ZBA some time ago, several aspects of the project have changed. Now, it's still the same proposed 500 megawatt solar farm, situated on 3,838 acres involving 51 separate participating parcels. However, there are significant changes that have been made for the second permitting attempt. Most notable, as referenced by Judge Slavin, is that when the applicant filed its petition for special use permit on May 6, 2021, Lee County's original ordinance regulating solar energy systems was in place. Sometime after the applicant filed its petition, the county overhauled its ordinance on solar energy systems with what I will refer to over the course of this hearing process as the new ordinance. While the applicant is bound by the terms of the original ordinance only, you will hear testimony over the course of this hearing process from the applicant's various representatives that the applicant voluntarily intends to exceed the requirements of the original ordinance and meet substantially all of the requirements set forth in the new ordinance. This, I believe, is a great example of the applicant's intent to be a good neighbor here in Lee County. You'll also hear about the level of community outreach that the applicant has taken with respect to the second permitting attempt. You're going to hear tonight and over the course of this hearing process about the steps the applicant has taken to reach out and generate a dialogue with the community surrounding the project. In a few minutes, I will present Geoff Neeves, the new developer of this project, following Tyler Kuhn's departure. Geoff will essentially provide you with a 50,000 feet view of the project and will encompass the level of community outreach that the applicant has taken. From there, you'll hear from Patrick Smith, project engineer, to discuss the technical aspects of the project.
Excuse me. Folks, please turn your cell phones to silent, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Judge. Next, you'll hear from Patrick Smith, project engineer, to discuss the technical aspects of the project and to address health and safety concerns. Later on in the hearing process, you'll hear from a representative from Kimley Horn to discuss the layout, decommissioning, hydrology, transportation access, and the glare and noise studies conducted. You'll hear from Mike Maroos to discuss property values, Tom Huddleston with Huddleston and McBride to address drainage concerns and the requirements of the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. Next up in our lineup would be Wendy Ryerson, former Lee County assessor, to discuss the potential real estate tax implications of the project and to dispel some misconceptions about the shifting tax burden. Finally, you'll hear from Jennifer Klingshirn, senior project manager with Energy Renewable Partners, to discuss the environmental aspect of the project and the assembly of the application materials. While the project has changed in some pretty significant ways, I think what you'll find as we go through our presentation and testimony is that much of the materials, reports, and expert witness testimony remains the same as far as the project's compliance with the rules and regulations of the county and the project's impact on the community. Therefore, at the conclusion of this hearing, and after careful consideration of all the evidence presented before you, it is my hope that you will agree that not only does the project as proposed meet the requirements of the Lee County's ordinance for solar energy systems and all the general requirements for the issuance of a special use permit, but you will ultimately recommend the project to the Lee County Board. So Judge, without further ado, I'd like to call our first witness, Geoff Neeves.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth. Am I right? There's a chair awaiting you. You may inquire.
Thank you, Judge. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, it's Geoff Neeves,
And how do you spell your last name?
Neebes.
Thank you. And could you please tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I've been in the renewable energy industry. Sorry, can y'all hear me?
Folks, whenever you're testifying, and it's certainly not Mr. Neeves' fault, these microphones practically have to be swallowed in order to be
Okay.
heard. Your lips right up next to them.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, Geoff Neeves, Neves, and I have been in the renewable energy business for over 13 years. I have developed over 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy projects across North America and have been working with Duke Energy for over 10 years.
And so where are you presently employed?
So I'm presently employed at Duke Energy Renewables.
And what is your position there?
I'm the Business Development Director.
And what does that encompass?
So I assist our development team in managing all of our renewable energy developments. That encompasses wind projects, solar projects, and storage projects.
And then more specifically, with respect to the applicant, what is your position for South Dixon Solar LLC?
So I am managing the development of the South Dixon project.
Do you have any experience developing solar energy projects?
I do. I've developed over 700 megawatts of solar projects that are at different stages of development or construction. And we have a new prospect pipeline of around 1,000 megawatts that I'm dedicated to managing.
What is the largest solar project you've developed?
So the largest project that I've been involved in developing with Duke Energy is 250 megawatts.
And with respect to the South Dixon Solar project, how long have you been directly involved with this project?
So I've been directly involved, as you mentioned, since Tyler moved out of his role. That's about a month. And I've been working on overall solar development prospects in the region for over a year with the Duke team.
On behalf of the applicant, do you agree to be bound by any and all proposals and representations contained within the petition, application binder, and testimony made under oath during this public hearing?
Yes, I do.
Where is this proposed project located?
So the South Dixon Solar Project is south of the city of Dixon.
And how many acres is it situated upon?
We are situated upon 3,838 acres.
And how many participating parcels are involved with the project?
51 parcels.
How did you choose this location for this project?
So primarily and we have other members of the team that can speak to more of the siting factors, but primarily it's due to the location and proximity of available transmission lines that allow for basically generating the electricity and putting it into the grid system. You also have to have landowners that are interested in participating, community has regulatory and supportive policies to support project development. So those are several of the reasons why this is a good area.
And are you familiar with the Lee County Ordinance regulating solar energy systems?
Yes, I am.
And are you aware that the original ordinance on solar energy systems governs this project?
Yes,
And are you aware that Lee County recently passed an updated ordinance on solar energy systems?
I am aware of that.
And so do you understand when I refer to the new ordinance, it is that ordinance I'm referring to?
Yes,
And though the project falls under the terms of the original ordinance, the company has voluntarily agreed to comply with some of the terms of the newer revised ordinance. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And why would it do that?
We want to be good neighbors in the community. We also want to build and develop and maintain a good relationship with the community, the county, all of our landowners and our neighbors. So,
And what community outreach has the applicant done for the second permitting attempt?
so we've engaged in several outreach efforts. We've had an open house forum where we were able to coordinate with more of the community. We've also coordinated and received support from the city of Dixon, the Lee County Industrial Association, the Rural Dixon Fire Department. We've been coordinating and conducting outreach with more of the project neighbors. And we have also had communication with the Amboy Independent School District.
And so when you say that you had an open house forum, do you mean that you held a community meeting under the terms of the new ordinance?
Yes, yeah, correct.
And it's my understanding that you have a PowerPoint presentation for tonight.
I do.
And did you personally prepare that PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I did.
Was it in anticipation of tonight's hearing?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I think she is.
Is it okay to start with the presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and discuss this project. Can everyone see that? Okay.
One gentleman's complaining it's not in focus. Looks okay to me, but. Huh? Well, let's see if, yeah. Leave some lights on, but. Can ZBA members still see? And if you're taking notes, are you okay? Okay.
Okay, I will proceed. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here to discuss our project. Again, I'm Geoff Neeves. A little bit about my background. I think maybe go to the next slide, please. Oh, sure, you can go to the next slide.
Same, go to the one after that.
Thank you. Very quickly, just some of my background. Again, I'm a business development director with Duke Energy. I've developed 3,000 megawatts across North America. Those are some of the largest projects operating today. I've developed about 750 megawatts across the US Midwest, 1.5 gigawatts in Texas, and 600 megawatts of international renewables. And we can move to the next slide, please. So this is a little bit of background about Duke Energy. For those that are not familiar, Duke Energy is one of the larger power holding companies in the United States, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. These are some of our business units. We operate along the East Coast. We also have operations in Indiana, a host of states, and our commercial business unit has generating power plants across the United States. Next slide, please. This breaks down some of our division between solar and wind projects. As I said, we develop solar, wind, and storage facilities across the United States. Next slide, please. This map shows our sites that are operating across the United States. Again, we have operations, wind, solar, storage in a lot of the states across the US. We have transmission and generation operations in Indiana, and we are encouraged and excited about our new projects here in Illinois. Next slide, please. This is a map just showing the general location of the South Dixon project in relation to the overall county. Next slide, please. That's a more detailed project footprint. Again, we have 51 participating parcels and 3,800 acres in the project footprint. Next slide, please. So a little bit more detail about the project specifics. It's a 500 megawatt ground mounted solar energy system. Again, on 3,800 acres, 51 participating parcels. The existing property is primarily row crop agriculture. And we are implementing land use practices that will allow those properties to go back into ag production once the project is over. Construction could begin anywhere in the 2022, 2023 timeframe. One of the things that I like to be very upfront about these types of projects is they do take time to develop and construct. So this is a long process. It takes a while to get these projects up and operating. The electricity produced from the project will be enough to power the equivalent of about 100,000 homes. It will utilize PV modules, and these are silicone, aluminum, polymers, some copper. These are inert materials and present no health risks. The project is also expected to generate over 50 million in taxes paid over 40 years. And we will deliver power to the Illinois electrical grid through a proposed substation that will be a utility-owned interconnection switching station. Next slide, please. As I said, if approved, this will be a 500 megawatt utility scale ground mounted solar farm of PV panels. They would be mounted to single access trackers that would be mechanically connected in rows and distributed as panel array blocks. The project will span over 3,800 acres south of Dixon between County Highway 11 and County Highway 22. And again, that generation would be equivalent to powering 100,000 homes. Next slide, please. We have broad support in the immediate area of the project footprint. The payment terms of the lease and easement agreements will inject millions of dollars into the local community. The energy from the solar system will also provide substantial economic benefits to the surrounding community, significantly in the form of property tax benefits. As I said, over $50 million over the project lifetime to Lee County, local townships, schools, and the other taxing jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Construction during the peak period of construction is anticipated to employ potentially 450 people. The construction activities deliver a lot of additional stimulus, not just from the actual construction jobs, but a lot of contributions to local businesses, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, hardware stores, and equipment rental and supply companies. Post-construction, the project would employ approximately 5 to 10 technicians at the operations and maintenance facility, plus traveling technicians to support larger O&M efforts. It would also be monitored remotely from Duke Energy's headquarters and operate, as I said, for a 40-year term. Next slide, please. We have a video that introduces some kind of basic information about solar development, solar projects. So if we can play that, go into a little more detail.
Every hour, the sun blankets the earth with enough light to power the world for a year. Duke Energy is capturing part of that as it works to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 thousands of years, people have harnessed the sun's power to make fire and heat their homes. But it wasn't until the 1800s when a 19-year-old French physicist discovered that we could use the sun's radiant energy to generate electricity. His idea spread until 1954, when a team in the United States invented the solar panel we know today. How do solar panels work? The technology is still evolving, but at its core, a panel is made of a collection of cells that capture light particles called photons from the sun. Inside, a semiconductor, usually silicon, layered with other materials, helps convert the light into usable electricity. Panels are now much more efficient and affordable. Since 2010, solar share of the United States electric generation mix has grown with solar installations in all 50 states. This has led to thousands of jobs and investments in the communities near solar installations. Duke Energy plans to add more renewables and cleaner energy sources to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. As we add to our fleet, we'll build a diverse generation mix and stronger grid so our electricity is affordable, reliable, and increasingly clean.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is a little summary of the project economics. The project would represent $450 million capital investment in Lee County. It would operate for 40 years. As I said, over that 40-year period, the project's expected to generate over $59 million in real property taxes to Lee County, Dixon Public School District 170, Amboy Community Unit School District, and the other taxing jurisdictions within its footprint. The project is estimated to have up to 450 jobs during the peak of the 18 to 24 month construction phase, and then 5 to 10 permanent full-time jobs during the operational phase. During construction, as I said, there will be additional economic stimulus to the local businesses. And then during the long-term operations, local services will be required for vegetation management and operation and maintenance services. Next slide, please. The project compliance items, some specifics I wanted to point out. The project would be 1.5 miles from the Dixon Municipal Airport. The glint and glare study commissioned by the project shows that there is no potential for glare to impact adjoining residences, roadways, or nearby airports and associated runways. If constructed, the project will comply with all applicable state and local regulatory standards permitting to electricity generation and transmission, as well as the National Electric Code. No project infrastructure components would exceed 30 feet in height. And the solar energy system and equipment will meet all the applicable setback requirements from property lines and residences. Next slide. Some more of the compliance items. Vegetative buffers will be used to screen the solar system from the public right-of-ways and adjoining residences. And then those vegetative buffers would be removed at the end of operations. 8-foot fencing would be installed around the perimeter. Lighting would be minimized and downcast. It will comply with all noise limitations imposed by the Illinois Pollution Control Board and the Lee County Solar Ordinance. The emergency action plan includes a fire protection plan for the construction and operations of the facility and emergency access. The project would also repair drainage tile damaged during construction of the project in accordance with the drainage tile and repair plan and the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, or AMA, signed with the Illinois Department of Agriculture. The project would also be sited outside of any floodplain and will avoid all wetlands. Next slide, please. So these are several of the milestones, status of the project currently. The interconnection feasibility study has been completed. Preliminary wetland delineation and habitat evaluation has been completed. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources compliance assessment has been completed. Preliminary cultural resource investigation has been completed. The natural resource information and land evaluation site assessment has been completed. As I said, the AMA, the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement, has been signed by the applicant, the project, and the state. The drain tile survey is in process. That would be completed prior to getting approval for the building permit. And then some of the pending items would be the road use agreement, drainage permits, driveway access permits, septic permits, signage permitting, floodplain development permits, and then downcast lighting plans. Next slide, please. As was stated previously, although the South Dixon project is subject to the standards of the original ordinance, the project has elected to voluntarily commit to several of the new standards of the new ordinance. As I said, we've committed to this plan for several reasons. We want to be a good member of the community. We plan to be a long-term business in the community, a long-term operator of this project. We want to build good relationship with the county and all the communities and stakeholders. We strive to be good stewards of the land and respectful, good neighbors to the participants and the non-participants. We are committed to adhering to almost all of the guidelines under the new ordinance. And even the two areas where we are not committing to the new ordinance guidelines, the project is actually adhering to more substantial commitments in those specific cases than the original ordinance. And the two examples where we plan to make those stronger commitments are where we plan to not adhere to the new ordinance. In one item under the consulting fund that's prescribed in the new ordinance, we just did not understand, I guess, the timing of how that fund would be terminated once the project no longer needed to reimburse the costs for these proceedings. Under the new ordinance, it says that that fund would be ended at the end of the project. So we didn't understand if that, meant at the end of this hearing process or at the end of the operations of the project. Nevertheless, we are committed to reimbursing all of the costs associated with the studies and consulting necessary for y'all to make a decision. So we're still abiding by that commitment under the original ordinance. And then, although we are bound by the guidelines of the original ordinance, on the new guidelines for the decommissioning plan, we are planning to adhere to all of the guidelines under the new decommissioning plan requirements, except for the commitment to 150% of the estimated cost of decommissioning. What we are planning to do instead is commit to 100% of the decommissioning cost, estimated decommissioning cost, which is something that is required by the AMA, the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement. And that again is a more substantial commitment than the original ordinance. The original ordinance only set forth a minimum of $1,000 an acre for the decommissioning cost. So we are committing to 100% of the estimated cost. Again, no salvage value can be applied to that. And it is a more substantial commitment. We just see a potential concern with 150% estimated cost that could create cost impacts to the project and the project financial model, where we might not be able to market the electricity competitively. If we can't compete in the marketplace to sell the electricity, then the project could potentially not go forward. So that's just one instance where we're committing to 100% of the estimated cost for decommissioning. We're committing to all of the new guidelines in terms of the decommissioning provisions. We're just not going to commit to that new ordinance change. But as some of our other testimony will show, we are basically committing to all of the other provisions of the new ordinance guidelines. So, and we can talk in more detail about that. I think that's the end of the presentation. Next slide. Oh, no. Again, as was stated previously, this just runs down some of our planned expert witnesses. Jason Cooper or one of his associates from Kimley Horn will talk about site plan designs and decommissioning. Tom Huddleston will talk about drain tile plans. Jennifer Klingshirn will talk about wildlife and environmental studies and soil studies. And my colleague, Patrick Smith from Duke Energy Renewables, will discuss health and safety. Mike Bruce will also cover property value impact analyses. And next slide. And that's all for the presentation.
Thank you, Judge. I have a few more questions for him.
Follow-up questions?
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Neeves, with respect to this consulting fund, and as it's proposed in the new ordinance, it would require the company to post the amount of $100,000 into an escrow account to cover all engineering, consulting, and legal fees incurred by the county for the duration of the project from conception to completion. Is that right?
Correct.
And so is it the company's position that it would not pay any of those monies owed?
No, we would pay any of those monies owed under the original ordinance provisions that required that we reimburse any costs. We would still adhere to that and commit to that. So any costs that would come in, we would reimburse those.
And then you referenced the new decommissioning requirements under the new ordinance, and I just want to flush out your testimony a little more. It's your position that with respect to all the requirements in the decommissioning part of the new ordinance, we would comply with all of them except for the company would commit to 100% of the estimated costs of decommissioning instead of the 150%. Is that correct?
Correct.
I have nothing further, Judge.
All right, very good. Around the horn, Mrs. Duffy, do you have any questions of this witness? Okay, Ms. Hinkle
Not at the moment.
and Mr. Boonstra.
No, sir.
Mr. Forster. Mr. Burrow.
Yes, since you brought up the subject and dwelled a little bit on this decommissioning, just roughly, what is the difference between the 100% cost and the 150% cost for the total project? Do you know that?
I can't speak to that specifically, but some of my colleagues can address the decommissioning plan and the decommissioning estimates in more detail.
Okay. And since you're the coordinator, what other states then does Duke have solar farms in, or how many do they have altogether?
We have quite a few across quite a few states. Again, we have teams that can speak to all the different operational details, but quite a few facilities on the East Coast, North Carolina, Texas. We're developing sites obviously here in Illinois, Indiana. So quite a few sites across the Midwest, the East Coast, some Western development as well in New Mexico.
Okay. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bothy,
Question.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes, do you recall what the term of the lease was, or the operation of the original application? Are you aware of that?
I am. I believe the original terms were 35 years. What you were seeing more across the industry is longer term operating periods. So moving to 40 years plus. There's also provisions to extend the life of the project by coordinating with the landowners to have operational lease extensions where we could go beyond that 35 to 40 year period.
Okay. Am I correct in stating that one of the strengths that's been advocated for solar farms is the ability to put the soil back into production after it's sat fallow for a period of time and therefore rebuilt the soil?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if the strength is to be able to put the soil back into an farm operational situation, why are you lengthening the terms of those leases?
So the option to potentially increase the term of those leases and the term of the project just gives us the opportunity, if the landowners are in favor of extending the project life, if we as a company determine that it is a viable business venture to continue operations, if that's a better option at the time than returning things to the original agricultural use, we would have that option, but it has to be in coordination with the project participants and the landowners. And it would be guided by the economics of the project at that time.
Okay. I had one more question for you. Give me a moment. I lost it trying to listen to. I'll pass. I'll probably have it. I'll have another opportunity. That issue will probably come up later.
Mr. Meyer? All right. Interested parties, I'm going to start with those in the courtroom. Questions of this witness, indicate you have a question by raising your hand. I'm not going to promise I'm going to call on the first hand raised, but I'm going to try. Sir, in the middle with a blue shirt. If you step up to the podium there, please. And if you want to take off your mask, you're free to. If you don't, that's fine as well. Would you start by giving us your name, please?
Jamie Lawson, an adjacent landowner.
Okay. Adjacent to the proposed solar project.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I walked in late. I didn't catch your name. I'm assuming you're replacing Tyler Kuhn.
Yes, Geoff Neeves.
Okay, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, has anything changed with your credit report since the last time you were in here? The last time you were in here, the Dun and Bradstreet said you had a moderate level of risk. You had a high level of risk for delinquency scores. You had a renewable energies had overall business risk of moderately high, and Dun and Bradstreet risk assessment of moderately high. Has anything changed with your Dun and Bradstreet report on your credit?
I would have to defer to some of our team that would be involved in our credit and finance departments. I can generally speak to the fact that Duke has been around for more than 100 years operating and is a Fortune 100 or 150 company. But I can defer to one of my other colleagues on our current credit ratings. So
Okay,
be
thank
happy
you.
to get that information to you.
I had been contacted by a few county board members. Is it true, and this might have been your counterpart, that Duke Renewable Energies has threatened lawsuits if this is not passed by the Lee County Board?
Can't speak to that.
You don't know the answer to
I'm
that
not
either.
aware of that. yeah.
Okay, would Duke Renewable Energies take the stance that they would sue the county if this does not pass?
I can't speak to that. I
No
don't.
answer again.
We,
Thank you.
we don't like to get into
Thank
those
you.
kind of matters.
Is it true that Duke Renewable Energies is paying people through the Good Neighbor program not to oppose this project, or offering to pay people?
No, I would say we are currently, as we work to develop any project, we try and include all the folks that want to participate in a project, whether that's by different agreements to host certain types of infrastructure or be part of the project footprint. So we have a lot of project participants, as I noted, over 51 parcels.
Okay, so if a person were to sign a Good Neighbor agreement and take money from Duke Energy, do they sign a disclosure agreement agreeing that they will not oppose the project?
I can't really speak. I'm not sure I understand the
Okay.
question.
This is going like the
We
last one.
we would offer, for the folks that are in the project area, we offer the opportunity to participate, and those that don't want to participate, we certainly understand if they choose not to.
Okay, 5 to 10 full-time, this pretty much seems like about the same as last time we were here, except that 35 years and 70 years went to 40 years. It was 5 to 10 full-time, and at the end of the hearings, it was down to 4 that weren't really full-time. They were going to bounce around between several different.
Just ask a question, please, Jimmy.
Okay, so how many full-time strictly dedicated to this site will be employed by this project?
So I would still have to say it's a range of 5 to 10 people. That a lot can depend on the type of systems that are installed, the type of panel operating system, and I can certainly call on some of my colleagues to give a better estimate, but it would just be an estimate.
Do you have an idea of how many parking stalls will be left after construction for the full-time employees?
Parking stalls?
Yes.
I can't speak to that.
No answer to that?
If we have parking at an O&M facility, we have ample parking.
I the only reason I ask, but that's fine.
That-
How many solar farms out of the ones that you mentioned that you own several solar farms? How many have you actually built, or how many have you actually purchased?
So, I develop these with our team. I don't do it personally, but we've developed a lot of the sites. We also do acquire sites. We partner with companies to develop sites. But at the end of the day, Duke is a long-term owner operator of power plants. We've been operating power plants across the country for a long time and have a lot of different types of generation. So we develop some of our own projects, we acquire projects, but then the goal is always to own and operate those power plants ourselves.
Okay. With Lee County's history with Duke Energy, with the Lee County Generating Station, which was basically sold underneath the noses of the Lee County Board. They had to hear about it from a press release. You mentioned commitment. Would Duke Renewable Energies be interested? Would they be willing to sign an agreement saying that they will own this project until it actually is turned back to farm ground, that they will not sell this project? Be commitments. You're asking the community for a commitment.
Mr. Luss, just ask a question,
Okay.
please.
Would you be willing to sign an agreement that says you will not sell the project until it's completely finished?
I can't say we would be willing
You can't
to
make
or
that
not willing
commitment.
to do something like that. That's,
Okay, you can't make
you
that
don't know what's going to happen in the course of operating a business.
And then my last question, and I thank you for your time. My last question is, according to the internet, and I know you can't believe everything on the internet, but how efficient is a solar farm? I look around and
Just
basically-
ask a question. Don't talk
Fif-
about you
fif-
looking around, just ask the question.
a 15 to 18% efficiency, is that true? Would that be a true statement for solar farms when the sun is
No.
shining?
No, I think the capacity factors, the availability factors have improved quite a bit above that. Again, there's a lot of things that impact those capacity and generating factors. We've got some engineering colleagues that can really speak to that in more detail, but in most cases, the generation and capacity factors for solar are getting up to where they are with other types of generation. So
Could you give me a percentage, please?
they're certainly not as low as you quoted at, they're above 30%. Every type of generation has a different capacity factor. And we can explain that in more detail, but solar has become more and more competitive as the technologies have improved with the panels. So the efficiencies are much higher than 18 to 20%.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Other interested party, raise your hand. A lady in the orange or salmon, I'll call it tonight. Start with your name, please.
Martha Johansson.
Martha, and what, do you live in Lee County?
I live in Lee County. I'm less than a mile from the project.
About how far would you?
About a half mile, I think, in
Okay,
some
thank you.
places.
Go ahead.
Will both sides of the panel generate electricity?
No, so the panels, and again, Patrick Smith, who's one of our engineers, can speak in more detail to the actual technical operations, but these are panels that basically move and track with the sun during the day. So they're one-sided panels, or one side has the photovoltaic layer to capture the energy. So it's not on both sides. It's not the type of tracking system that rotates, I guess, vertically that you might be talking about.
When the panels are horizontal to the ground, what is their height?
Again, the specific height, I would defer to Patrick to give you the exact height or a range of heights, because it may depend on what type of panel we use and what type of system is installed. One of the things that we have to work with is the availability of the equipment, which manufacturers can provide the equipment on our schedule. So at this stage, we don't know for sure what type of panel, so the height may vary a little bit, but it would be in accordance with all the ordinance requirements.
Do you also know what the maximum height of a panel would be tilted at its extreme?
Again, I'd let Patrick Smith address that, because there could be some variation. These panels are typically not, they're not 10 feet off the ground from the base of the actual panel. They're usually more 4 to 5 feet where the panel would start. And then at the height of the vertical orientation, I'll let Patrick kind of discuss that.
Is there regular barbed wire on top of this 6-foot fencing?
No, I'll let the engineering folks speak to those kind of design elements, but typically that's not seen on the fencing. That's more of a requirement around substation facilities because of the transformer equipment.
So there will not be anything on top of the fencing around the project then?
No, we wouldn't typically have barbed wire or any sort of those types of toppers on the fence.
Will the fencing be woven wire or chain link?
So it'll be the woven wire. Again, Patrick Smith can speak to more of the design elements, but it would be the woven mesh fencing, except where we have plans to use screening or the vegetative screening.
These 5 to 10 permanent employees, would they be employed only at this South Dixon facility, or would they be available to work at other facilities in the area?
So it would depend on the proximity of any other facilities. I won't say that the folks at one project can always be dedicated to that specific project. If we have multiple projects in an area, they might rotate and assist with issues at a different site. But more than likely, we would have, that range of 5 to 10 people dedicated to this site, unless we have operations close by where we'd have shared operations and maintenance teams.
Is there any provision to reimburse for road repair after the trucks bringing in supplies run over these roads?
Yes, yes, ma'am. That's usually part of the road use agreement that we would coordinate and put in place, where we have a road use plan, and then we have provisions to address repair and then reimbursement for any damage and costs.
Where would these 450 temporary employees park?
So usually with these types of projects, we'll have a laydown yard. There'll be a construction headquarters, a construction management office. So there's usually a place where everybody can mobilize on site, and that'll be coordinated and determined by the logistics of where the best place for that laydown yard would be, which landowners are in favor of hosting that, and that's all still to be determined. So.
Are you planning on more than one laydown yard?
Typically, we don't have more than one construction office, one laydown yard. So at this time, I can't say that we would have more than one. It'd probably just be one.
What is a substation?
So the substation is the facility where we actually interconnect to the transmission, the power line system. There's two types of substations. There's our project facility, which is kind of like the gathering station where we bring all of the underground collection lines from the solar panels together. And then we tie into a existing utility substation to interconnect to the grid and get the power on the big transmission lines. So there can be a project station and a utility substation. Usually we try and find sites where we can site our substation close to an existing facility, but sometimes we have to build a new substation to tap the transmission system.
Are you going to build any facility to store the electricity, or will it go directly onto the transmission lines?
So at this time, we've looked at storage as a possibility, but at this time we're just planning for the solar facility to tie directly into the grid. But storage is becoming a more common type of facility that's co-located with solar and wind energy and even other types of conventional energy. So, but we're not planning to do that currently.
Do you have a buyer for your electricity yet?
We do not. We are working on that, but that's a big component of a project moving forward. But you have to have a lot of your development and site planning in place before you can really start to market the electricity, and you have to know all the design elements and all the costs that are going to be part of building the project so that you can determine what power price you can sell the electricity for. So that's still in progress.
Do you plan on killing any vegetation?
I can't speak to whether we would kill any vegetation. You mean clearing or brush control for the construction?
Well, I'm sorry, but you don't ask her questions. She asks you. If you don't understand the question, say it.
Yeah, I mean, we can again address that like our site plan in more detail with the engineering and design folks.
Do you know how many entrances there will be to this project?
Again, I think Patrick Smith would probably be best to discuss how we would design the entrances and access points. We try and minimize those, obviously, but it kind of depends on the orientation of the panels and how we have to access each of the parts of the array.
Does 100,000 or this 100% of estimated cost, is that in today's dollar value or is that in 40 years value,
So
years from now?
and I think we will speak in more detail about the decommissioning provisions, but as part of the decommissioning requirement, we have to have that estimate updated. I believe it's every 3 years or 5 years, 3 or 5 years. So that would be updated as the project goes forward in time. So those types of increases in inflation would be factored into that updated estimate of what the decommissioning costs would be. And again, under the ordinance, we can't include any value for salvage in that estimate. So we are agreeing to the 100% of the estimated cost. And then there would be, additional value from the salvage of the facility. So really the county, the community, the landowners are well protected because we're going to adhere to 100%, and that's going to be updated incrementally as the project goes forward. So if costs do go up, that'll be part of the updated estimates.
If after 40 years, you decide to continue the lease, do all 51 participants have to sign off on this?
Not necessarily. It would depend on the dynamics of how the project might be repowered. Typically, when we talk about renewing a site, we call it repowering. So at that point in time, we would have to decide whether we would maintain the same generating capacity and keep the project the same size, or if there were changes in how we wanted to operate the facility, or if landowners decided they didn't want to participate in continuing, then we would have to take all of that into consideration. So
Thank you.
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep. Lady in the blue sweater in the front row. Help us get started with your name. And where you
Jennifer
live.
Lawson, and I am adjacent to the project.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So your 5 to 10 employees, have you evaluated what the displaced jobs that will be for the agricultural?
Could you clarify displaced?
Trucking, sprayers, the spraying the crops, the trucking companies that move the crops, the people that actually harvest the crops, plant the crops, that may be not necessarily landowners, but do actually do crop rotation and rent the land. So you're displacing those jobs. How is that justified, 5 to 10 people versus those?
I can't speak to those kind of impacts because I don't know who would be operating those types of activities on these specific properties, and I can't say whether they would stop operating entirely or they would move to other properties. I can't speak to that specifically.
So there was an email from Tyler Kuhn a little while back. I know this is not a question, sir, but he had stated that there were going to be battery cells.
You're not under oath. Just ask him a question.
Okay.
Please.
So you had mentioned that there's potential for storage. So does the storage need to be part of the petition based off of what needs to be done for pending fire evacuations, the lithium batteries that are part of it, SPCC, SW3Ps, fire extinguishing for the foam systems for the lithium batteries that can be environmentally impacted, SDSs. that should be part of the petition. Do you, or do you not agree?
Since we're not planning to install storage at this time, it's not part of the petition. If we decided to initiate that type of project in the future, then I would imagine we would have to come back and go through a separate petition, separate process for that type of storage facility. So we're not planning to do that at this time. And if we decided to in the future, we would have to come back and permit that separately. And even from a transmission interconnect process, those storage facilities have to be separate, separately studied developments. So as I said, we've looked at that. We've looked at that at a lot of different sites, but we're not planning to do that here currently.
So you mentioned 100% at the end of the project for salvage. That's what that is.
No, so salvage can't be applied to the estimate. It can't offset the estimated cost. So we have to put up financial security to cover 100% of the estimated cost to decommission everything, and we can't assign any salvage value to offset that 100%.
But that's the end of the project, correct?
It's when the decommissioning financial security is required to be put in place. But yeah, that's to get everything out at the end of the project.
Okay, so this might be a question for Patrick. And you can correct me if I am wrong or not, but panels do have a lifespan on them, which is not 40 years. So you will need to replace the, yes, you will need to replace the panels sometime during this 40-year project.
Right.
Because they don't not have a 40-year lifespan, correct?
Right. And
Does that 100% salvage account for those, getting rid of those midway through the project?
Well, and Patrick can speak to the specific lifespan of panels. Again, it depends on what type of panels you're using, but there's going to be a need to have repair and maintenance of panels throughout the life of the project. So, for different reasons, you can have damage to the panels and have to replace those. So that's a part of just the operations and maintenance of the project.
So they will meet the UL 61730 criteria for damage.
Right. Yeah. And Patrick can
How
probably
will
speak to
you dispose of the panels that you replace?
So Patrick can probably speak to that in more detail than I can.
Yes, I'll talk to Patrick soon.
Yes, yeah, I would say that's probably
Thank you.
best. Thank you.
Other folks in the room, questions, raise your hand. Yes, sir, in the back, the black shirt.
Jim Turtelot. I am adjoining landowner surrounded on three sides by the project.
Spell your last name for court reporter, please.
Tourtillott.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So you concluded your presentation with a project milestone of downcast lighting. Can you explain the lighting requirements for the project of the 3,800 acres once it is operational?
It's probably best for Patrick and some of our consulting testimony to address that. Again, those are kind of design and engineering elements that they're better suited to talk to.
Let me ask you just in general, is the entire 3,800 acres lit at night?
No, we don't have to light the farm, the entire farm.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other folks in the room. Yes, sir. Would it be easier for you to stay seated and we'll take a mic to you, or are you okay? All right, I guess you're
Chuck
okay.
Willett.
Okay, where do you live, Charles? Where do you live? Sorry.
We ain't in favor.
Are you adjoining the project?
Not in favor.
You understand? Because I do. Yes, sir, in the checkered shirt. You can stay there. There's a mic there's a mic right in front of you. Oh, it's not working.
I might not hear his answers.
You want to help us get started? What's your name?
Okay,
What's your name?
Charles Fitz, Fitts.
Charles, where do you live?
Where do I'm probably less than a half mile. The farm is less than a half mile downstream of the solar farm.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead and ask your questions of Mr. Neeves.
Okay, well, this is my second go around like Duke Energy, and I came to most of the meetings last time.
You don't have to tell us. I asked you, what questions do you have of Mr. Neeves?
What is the question?
Yeah, what's your question of him?
Okay, well, I think this is the topic night to ask these questions. Why did Duke Energy come to South Dixon Township to build the solar farm? Because you
That's a
sent,
question. That's a question. Just stop right there and.
okay, that's my question.
Okay, yes, sir. As I said, we have several factors that influence how and where we develop projects. It's mainly access to transmission to power lines, where you have a good site that is feasible for development, but also close to transmission lines, because you have to be able to generate the electricity and get it to the grid. So that's probably the main reason.
Okay, I'll accept that for an answer.
You don't have to
But
comment. Just any other
anyway,
questions?
with the modern technology,
Mr.
you could build
Stites,
it in,
Mr. Stites, let's stop a minute. This is not the time for you to testify. If you got another question of him, please go ahead and ask.
okay, I guess it's not the topic night. I'm done.
Okay. Any other folks in the room? Yes, in the white shirt in the back. And help us get started with your name, please.
My name is Lonnie Smith. I live at 1502 Pump Factory Road.
And how far is that, would you estimate, from the boundary of any project, any boundary of the project? Wow.
Right in the middle of it.
Okay, thank you. And would you spell your last name for?
SMITH.
Okay, good. Go ahead. Questions?
Okay. Did you not state that you're not going to build in wetlands or floodplain zone?
Correct.
Okay, 1502 is in a floodplain.
Now
zone.
you're telling them things. That's what I talk about. This is the
Okay,
time
yes
for
or no?
questions. You're not under oath and you can't testify.
Okay, yes or no?
No, we're not building in a floodplain, and we're avoiding the wetlands.
Well, you are building in a floodplain.
No, you're
zone.
telling them things again. Folks,
How many
folks will
people
get out of
did you-
control if we start doing that. This is the time for questions.
How many people did you say you would have for the first 2 years coming in and out of that area?
How many during the construction period?
Right.
About 450 is the estimate for this size construction
Okay,
project.
speaking out in the country, what's that going to do to my view and my property values having all those people around? What's that going to do to my property? Is it going to raise my property value or minus it?
So
How many questions do you want him to answer? Just ask him a question.
What's that going to do to my property value?
There you
So the construction period, again, it's temporary. In terms of, long-term impacts, we've done a lot of study about the impacts to property values, and we're going to have an expert testimony address that during, the long-term operations of the project. In most studies, there's not a negative impact to the property values by being close to a solar project. The construction traffic is just going to be temporary. And In terms of looking at the construction traffic, I mean, we are going to have a road plan, logistics plan, so try and do that in as organized a manner as we can.
Okay, but he did state you're not going to build a floodplain zone though, right?
Correct. And there may, the project footprint in terms of the boundary that's on a map, that we have identified where the floodplains are, where there may be potential wetlands. That doesn't mean we're building in those areas. We're not going to have panels in those areas.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Any other folks in the room? All right, it's time for, I know there's Zoomers. I can see you Zoomers, but it's time for a short recess. Let's reconvene about 10 of 9. And are you gonna have any follow-up with him? It's gonna be Glenn. Gonna be a few nights on this one. 12, 15. My guess. Huh? Yes, please. now to, Zach. Oh, okay. Back, well, we got to call on Zoomers, so we got to. Zoomers, if you want to do the, if you're on the video conferencing, go to participants, click to raise hand if you got a question of Mr. Neeves. And if you're on your video, or if you're on teleconferencing, just your cell phone, hit asterisk or star and then number 9 to raise your hand. And I'm looking at the board, so I'll see if any of you have any questions. Actually, it says connecting to audio. Maybe they didn't hear me. Okay. Okay, I'm looking for a hand raise. I'm having to crane my neck, but I don't think I see one.
There was not when I was up there.
Okay, no hands raised on Zoom. Mr. Neeves, you may step down. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Judge, I'd like to call Patrick Smith as our next witness.
And would you do me the courtesy when we're going along? I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly at 9:30, but when you think you've reached a good breaking point, let me know.
Okay.
I mean, you know your line of questioning better than I do. So when you think you've reached a good breaking point.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, you want to raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Have a seat. Yep, you certainly can. And I'll put mine back on.
Room looks different from up here.
May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Can you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Patrick Smith, Patrick Smith.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background?
I have a bachelor's in civil engineering with an emphasis on structural engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer in 3 different states, and I specialize in energy and energy infrastructure.
And how are you presently employed?
I'm a solar development engineer for Duke Energy Renewables.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've been working in energy for since I've got my PE, so 4 or 5 years, and specifically for Duke Energy Renewables for about 3 years now.
And can you describe generally what you do as a solar development engineer?
Yeah, so I lead, oversee, review all of the engineering elements of the solar site, so both internal and external. So that's from the early stages of siting and choosing sites to the middle stages of doing geotechnical analysis, cost estimating, to the construction side of things.
And Mr. Smith, I'm going to ask you just to lean into your microphone a little bit more.
Excuse me.
Thank you. And what is your role with the applicant?
I am the lead engineer on this project.
And are you familiar with the South Dixon Solar Project?
I'm pretty familiar with it. I've been with it since the beginning, so I see a lot of familiar faces out there. You would have seen me in the last ZBA meeting in December of 2020. You would have seen me at the community meeting in June. And I have been with it since its inception. So I was there when we interconnected it into queue, when we chose a site, when we selected the equipment. So I'm very familiar with it.
And can you please describe the work you've performed in connection with the South Dixon Solar Project?
Yeah, pretty much everything I just said. I oversaw nearly all of the engineering of the project.
And on behalf of the applicant, do you agree to be bound by any and all proposals and representations contained within the petition, the application materials, and the testimony made under oath during this public hearing?
I do.
And so you're obviously familiar with the applicant's petition for special use permit.
I am.
And are you aware that as of the filing date of the petition, the original solar ordinance governs the project?
I am.
Okay. And are you aware that Lee County has since passed an updated or revised ordinance?
I am.
And if I refer to it as the new ordinance, you're going to understand that I am referring to that revised or updated ordinance.
I will.
And if I refer to the original ordinance, you will understand that I'm referring to the first solar ordinance in Lee County that legally governs the project.
I will.
And it's my understanding that you have a PowerPoint presentation for tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you prepare that?
I did.
Was it in preparation for tonight's hearing?
It was.
Can we pull his PowerPoint presentation up, please?
Yeah, it's a continuation.
start with the slide that says Patrick Smith.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You could get us to the slide that reads Patrick Smith. That would be great.
I think it's 19,
It's actually 20, but that's all right.
page 19. I think.
It's 20, Zach.
Could be. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, if you just want to advance it 2 slides really quickly, I guess I'll talk a little bit kind of quickly about what I'm going to do here. You guys have all actually heard this before. It's the same slideshow that you saw a few months ago. So I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, but it's just to level set everybody on what the equipment that we're using on the site is, what it looks like, just so we're on familiar terms with what I say when I mean inverter, what I say when I mean panel. I'm going to clarify a few things that my colleague Geoff said, is not an engineer, and there were a lot of phenomenal engineering questions asked, but is not an engineer. So I'm going to clarify a few things that he said. Okay, great. Yeah, if you'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a typical solar site. And I'm going to go through this kind of quick. So if I need to slow down, just give me a hand signal here. But this is a typical solar site. This is a real site that Duke operates. This is what it looks like. This is what, when I say a panel, that's what I'm talking about. One of those segments there. That's what I'm talking about when I say a grassland prairie. That's what's underneath it. And that's what we would plant and maintain the entire life of the project. One thing you'll notice is that there's more grass than there is green here. And that's a little bit of an older project. You'd see even more grass on this project. The row spacing between those panels, between the piles, is 20 feet. And the typical panel size is about 6.5 to 7 feet by 3 feet. So you're going to have twice as much green space as you are going to have panel. So that's typically what you're going to look at there. And separating the panels does a couple of things for us. One, it improves the flooding and the erosion of the site because there's more green space than there is panel space. The more grass there is, the better the infiltration is, reduces the erosion, improves the drainage of the site. It does a lot of great things for us. Another thing that it does is it allows us to access the panels to perform maintenance. So if we have a broken panel, we can get right in there, we can take it off, and we have no problem. And then the last thing it does is it helps with the production of the site. The further
Mr. Smith, can you do me a favor for the clerk, please slow down?
excuse me. Yeah. And then, okay. And then the last thing that it does is it helps the production of the site. The further apart the panels are, the less shade there is in early hours of the day and late hours of the morning. I have that backwards. Late hours of the day and early hours of the morning. They won't shade one another, which would reduce the production of the site. I'll touch on the height really quickly. The pile height, the actual steel pile we put in, is about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. So at noon, the panel is going to lie directly flat. So it's not going to be any taller than 4.5 to 5 feet. The final number will actually be determined by the geotechnical specifications. So that could shift up or down a little bit and depends a little bit on the topography of the site, but you're going to see about 4.5 feet. At maximum tilt, which is 60 degrees, that's only going to occur twice a day. So these things will be stored flat when possible, which is 4.5 to 5 feet. But at the earliest hours of the morning, when the sun first comes up, and at sundown, they'll be tilted to 60 degrees, which is about 8 feet. Panel size changes a little bit. Like I said, it's about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. So that number will, maybe be a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher. Tough to know in 2024 or 2025, whenever the project gets built, but that's about 8 feet max is what you're going to see there for the panels. If you'll go to the next slide. Yeah, this is one thing I want to clarify a little bit. We do plan on using bifacial panels. That's what I spoke about last time. I believe everybody's familiar with it, but the thing about bifacial and monofacial is they're identical. Literally, the only difference is that monofacial panels have a white back sheet on the back and bifacial panels do not. They do that because the panels used to not be efficient, as someone stated tonight. They used to not be that efficient, and so it didn't make any sense to collect the energy reflected off the ground. Now the panels are so efficient, it is much more economical to collect reflected energy off of the grass. So we put a second sheet of glass on there. It collects that energy, it makes the panel stronger, and it's better for everybody. If you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and these are the last two pieces of equipment that I'll talk about. The tracker it's pretty simple. It's just a motor mounted on a pile, just like the panels, and it just turns the panels slowly as the sun tracks across the sky. So pretty simple equipment, it's quiet. It moves slowly throughout the day. No big deal. And the last piece of equipment is the inverter pad or the inverter skid, you might hear it called. This picture is a little bit old, but I like it because it shows the different components of an inverter. So if you saw an inverter today, it would be a lot smaller than that, and it would look like one cohesive unit, like the middle section of cabinets there. It would just look like a run of cabinets. And it'd be a little bit smaller than that. But that shows the three different components, or the two different components, excuse me, which are the transformer and the inverter. And we would mount it on piles whenever possible, just like we would do the panels. The geotechnical report might dictate that in certain places we would need to put them on concrete, but in every opportunity we'd like to put them on panels. It's better for everybody. And so those are the general pieces of equipment on a solar site. I'll quickly go through how generation works on a solar site. You all have heard it before. So sunlight hits the panel generates low voltage direct current, which is taken along the cable to the back to a combiner box where the wires are buried and taken to the inverter. The inverter inverts it from DC to AC. The transformer steps it up to medium voltage where it is transported to the substation. The substation transforms it to transmission voltage where it's connected to a ComEd owned interconnecting substation, puts it on the grid, and that's how you get it. At no point in this process is energy stored anywhere as part of this application. It is entirely generation to transmission. So this application, there is no storage required at all. It is directly transmission to generation. Yeah, I think that's it for my presentation.
Thank you. Judge, this PowerPoint presentation, I've marked it as petitioners 1. I'd like to admit that into evidence at this time.
The whole of it.
Yes, please.
Well, remind me, pending any cross-examination.
Okay. Mr. Smith, what, if anything, can you tell me about the project's effect on the character of the neighborhood?
The neighborhood is primarily ag right now, and the great part about solar is we call it a great neighbor. It's not like wind because it doesn't have shadow flicker, it doesn't make a lot of noise, it doesn't vibrate anything, there's no gases emitted, it just quietly rotates. And the other thing about this project in particular, these are the largest setbacks I've ever seen on a solar project. I'm not exaggerating. An 800 by 800 foot exclusion zone it's huge. It's the biggest I've ever seen on any of the projects I work on. So we've taken what I believe to be very fair measures to preserve the character of the neighborhood.
Think the project will have any effect on local traffic conditions?
Temporarily, it will. During construction, as pointed out, there is going to be an increase in traffic. The important thing to note about that, we have prepared a transportation plan where you can see the amount of entrances and all that stuff. The project is going to be phased in different sections, and because it's so wide, sometimes you'll see a lot of people working in one section, and there will be nobody working on the other section. So there will be an increase in traffic temporarily, but long-term, we expect the traffic to go down.
And will there be 450 people on site at all times at the project during construction?
No, most likely not.
Well, how will you accommodate parking for those working during construction?
Yeah, so like I said, the project is done in phases. So we would have whichever phase is being worked on at that time. Say you're driving piles on one section, there would be a small parking area there, and they would drive the piles in that section. And when they moved on, they would move it further down the line. So we would have several small sections throughout the progress of the project. And the same goes for laydown yards. We would probably have one main laydown yard by the O&M building, but we would have smaller ones to accommodate the specific sections or the specific work being done in that area.
Will the project have any effect on the local environment?
I can speak to the panels. The panels will have no effect on the local environment. The panels are completely safe. There's no hazardous materials to worry about. There will be less herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers used for For all the specifics of the environmental hazard, Jen Klingshirn will be presenting later. I can speak generally, but she did a whole report on it, the EcoCat, and she can speak to specifics.
And will the project comply with all applicable rules, regulations, and standards?
We will.
And does the project as proposed meet the requirements set forth in the original ordinance?
It does.
And does the applicant intend to comply with all requirements at the state and federal level?
We do.
And does the applicant intend to use industry best practices?
We do.
Turning to the original ordinance requirements, are you familiar with what I call the application binder
I am.
or the application materials?
Sure, help prepare it.
Okay. And that was submitted as part of the applicant's petition for special use permit?
Yes.
Is there a site plan included with that application?
Yes, there's a site plan and a solar energy systems plan. Both of those were prepared by Kimley Horn. We have a representative from Kimley Horn who is going to be testifying later about the specifics of how it was created and what information was used. I can speak generally about any questions that anybody has about it.
And has the applicant provided any details with the application materials related to the fencing for the project?
Yeah, so the original ordinance actually calls for a chain link fence. That's in accordance with the National Electric Code, which says a chain link fence with a 1 foot barbed wire on top of it, but the National Electric Code allows for variations to that. So the new ordinance calls for a chain link fence, but at the request of non-participating landowners, we could switch it to a woven wire fence. And so we've heard the community the first time. We're just going to use a woven wire fence. I think that's an 8 foot tall woven wire fence.
And what is the height or in the original ordinance for the fence?
6 feet. Sorry, one more thing, excuse me. There are specific specifications for the substation, which could be a different requirement. Those are controlled by the utility, and we have no say over ComEd and PJM's requirements.
And will the fencing contain appropriate warning signage that is in accordance with NESC and ANSI Z535 safety sign standards?
Yep. Everything else that's in the new ordinance, we will abide by that. So OSHA standards, sign safety standards, we'll make sure that it's maintained. It's part of our regular maintenance plan to make sure that the fence is in good order.
In directing your attention to the setbacks for the proposed project, does the project adhere to the setback requirements in the original ordinance?
It does.
And so would all equipment be set back, excluding the fence, a minimum of 50 feet from the front property line?
Yes.
Would the setback for all equipment, again excluding the fence, be set back 15 feet from rear and side property lines in an agricultural district?
Yes.
And would that same setback apply from 300 feet from the property line of a platted subdivision or other residents not in an Ag 1 district?
Yes.
And would all equipment, again excluding the fence, be set back 200 feet for inverters and transformers from the property line of non-participating parcels?
Yes.
So now turning your attention to the new ordinance requirements for setbacks, does the project adhere to those requirements?
Yes, and in some cases we exceed them.
Okay. So all equipment will be set back 15 feet from any property line, is that
Yes.
correct? And then you mentioned an exclusion zone. Does the project intend to comply with the exclusion zone requirements of the new ordinance?
Yes.
And will all equipment be set back 60 feet from the center line of any township roadway?
Yes.
And will that same equipment be set back 75 feet from the center line of any county roadway?
Yes.
Will that same equipment be set back 50 feet from the right of way of any state road?
Yes.
Will that same equipment be set back 400 feet from the property line of any platted subdivision?
Yes. But actually, this is a great example of where we exceed it. We'll be doing 500 feet.
Will equipment be set back 500 feet for any inverters, transformers, and or storage equipment?
Yes, we'll keep those as internal to the project as possible. So yeah, 500 is the minimum, but largely there'll be more than that.
And so the new ordinance contains certain fencing setbacks, is that correct?
That's correct.
Will the project comply with all of the fence setbacks contained within the new ordinance?
It will.
Will Knox boxes and keys be provided at locked entrances for emergency personnel access?
Yes.
And you touched on this earlier, but what is the maximum height of the panels?
So at full tilt, which again is not typical, it only happens twice a day, it would be about 8 feet, give or take a little bit.
Okay. Will all systems, equipment, and structures be under 30 feet?
That is an old ordinance requirement. A new ordinance requirement is 20 feet, and we will meet 20 feet, in all likelihood exceed it.
And when you say exceed it, you mean,
Less than 20 feet. Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
will the project have any lighting at the site?
There will be a little bit of lighting. The substation requires lighting. The entrance has motion sensing lighting, and there would be lighting at the inverters potentially, but those would not be on all the time. Only maybe the substation or the motion sensing lighting. And all of it would be shielded and downcast, so it wouldn't spill onto adjacent parcels.
What noise, if any, will the project generate?
The original ordinance calls for 50 decibels, that it can't exceed 50 decibels. The new ordinance requires us to abide by the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards, which is less than 50 decibels. Kimley Horn has already done the analysis on that. There's a noise study that is contained within the application, and we we are underneath all of that decibel limits across every octave band.
Will there be any glare associated with the project?
Again, Kimley Horn has prepared a glare study, and one of their associates will be presenting later in the process, but we have there will be no glare impacts associated with the project. We apply an anti-glare coating to all of the panels. They're designed to absorb as much electric energy, sunlight as possible, so there will be no issues with glare.
Would it be a fair statement that the solar collectors will be placed such that concentrated solar glare will not project onto nearby structures for this project?
Yes.
And the original ordinance does not have any vegetative screening requirements, is that correct?
That's correct. The new ordinance requires a certain amount of vegetative screening, and we will abide by the new ordinance standards.
Does the project have any plans for outdoor storage?
During construction, there's a small amount of storage. So short term, we would have to store panels before they are mounted and things like that. But long term, the only things that would be stored would be spare parts and extra panels, and those would be stored inside a container or in the O&M building, but they wouldn't be just laying around outdoors.
So those items you just mentioned, those would be strictly limited to the operation and maintenance of the project?
That's correct. Things needed to operate and maintain the site.
And so did you or the applicant submit a landscape plan with the application materials?
Yes, we've submitted a landscape plan, and we'll have someone testifying about that later in the process.
And did the applicant include manufacturer's specifications with the application materials?
Yeah, we've spec'd Trina panels and SunGrow inverters. That technology could change slightly as the panel technology evolves, but it would be the same type of technology, and I can answer any questions about the specifics of the panels.
Sure. And should those items change in the future, would you supplement that information prior to the
Absolutely.
issuance of a building permit?
Yes.
Does the application contain connection and interconnection details for the project?
It does.
And did the applicant complete a solar glare hazard analysis tool or SIGHAT for the project?
Yeah, that was completed as part of the glare analysis that Kimley Horn did.
Did the applicant submit a fire protection plan with the application?
We've submitted a fire protection plan and an emergency action plan. We've actually met with the chief of the fire district, Chief Arand, and talked with him about the process, general fire safety regulations. We're going to keep him informed. We committed to giving him the plan of the day for the solar site, so he knows where people are operating. He's going to be invited to the monthly construction meeting. We'll let him know which sides of the site are going to be electrified when. We'll have a map and access to the site. So we've done that.
And did the applicant initiate a consultation with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources for any endangered species and wetlands?
Yes, we have. Jen Klingshirn is going to be reporting on that later in the process.
And has the applicant identified all routes on county and township roads that will be used for construction and maintenance purposes?
Again, yes, we have. That's a Kimley Horn item that someone is going to be presenting on later.
And does the applicant intend to enter into a road use agreement with the county and township commissioners?
Yes, the original application only calls for a pre-construction and post-construction survey. And we would have done that regardless. We're going to do a pre-construction and post-construction survey. We commit to repairing any damage. They go through and they take a picture of every square inch of the roads that we're going to use, and they will repair any damage. We'll also abide by all the other elements of the ordinance, which include a traffic impact analysis, a road use agreement, and all the other elements in the new ordinance.
Does the applicant intend to commit to repairing or restoring all drainage tiles damaged during construction to the same or better condition as to when construction began?
Yes, we're required to do that per the AMA. Tom Huddleston will be presenting on that later in the process and can speak more to it.
Does the applicant commit to contacting local drainage districts before beginning construction to locate the drainage district tiles?
Yes,
Has the applicant executed the solar agricultural impact mitigation agreement with the Illinois Department of Agriculture?
we have.
And is that included in the application materials?
It is.
Is there a decommissioning plan with the application?
Yes, that was prepared by Kimley Horn, and they can present on the specifics of how it was created later, and I can speak generally about it, answer questions.
To the best of your knowledge, do you know when the decommissioning plan has to be updated according to the AMA?
Yeah, according to the AMA, we need to update it with new estimates every 5 years.
Okay. And is that consistent with the new ordinance regulations on decommissioning?
That is consistent with the new ordinance.
Does the applicant intend to carry liability insurance?
Yes,
And will it meet the original ordinance terms as to liability insurance?
and the new ordinance. Yes, and the new ordinance.
With respect to the new ordinance requirements, does the applicant intend to adhere to the Section E, stormwater management, retention of topsoil, and minimum disturbance to prime farmland provisions?
Yes, all of those are covered in the AMA as well. We intend to disturb as little topsoil as we possibly can. Any topsoil that we have to pick up, we will segregate. We won't mix it with subsurface soils, and we will put it back right where we found it. Yeah, we'd like to minimize grading. We'd like to do zero entirely if we can.
Will there be any communication interference associated with the project?
There won't be. I've never seen that happen on any of our projects, and I've never read any studies that associate communication interference with a solar site.
Does the applicant intend to adhere to the Section F operational standard conditions of the new ordinance?
We do intend to adhere to all of that. One example of that is we'll be keeping track of the amount of water we use to wash the panels with. Because it's an easy number to keep track of, we don't plan on washing the panels. Mother Nature normally does all of that for us. We would not plan any washings. We'd let it happen naturally. There could be an occasion for it, but we typically don't do that.
Will the project adhere to the construction times of no earlier than 6 a.m. and no later than 9 p.m.?
Yes.
It's my understanding that you have one more slide to finish with, dedicated to frequently asked questions. Is that correct?
That's right.
Please proceed.
Go to one more slide here. I'll touch on these quickly. Like I said, we've gone over some of them, and Courtney asked some great questions, but the panel composition is the easiest one. It's 90% aluminum and glass. Then there is the silicon, which is the collector face. There are some small amount of semiconducting metals like silver and copper. That's nearly the entire panel. There, like you've heard before a million times, there can be trace amounts of lead in the panel. It is just like every other electronic out there. Depending on the soldering being used, there can be trace elements of lead, but that's no different than your phone, your computer, your laptop, your TV, any of that stuff. We are underneath the EPA regulated limit. In many cases, we are below detection on that limit. So even if they tried to find it, they couldn't. That's how low the lead is in panels that have it. Some of them don't even have it. The other hazardous material that gets brought up a lot is cadmium, because there is a solar panel that is made with an element called cadmium telluride. We are not using those panels on this site. We are using crystal silicon panels. So it won't even be an issue. A third one that we hear a lot about is called PFAS or Gen X chemicals. It is a hydrophobic, a waterproof spray. It is a non-stick spray that is associated a lot with non-stick pans, with temporary food coverings like plastics, with waterproof cosmetics. And it is not an issue on these solar panels. There was some concern in the past that the plastic white backsheet on monofacial panels might have some PFAS in it, but we will not be using monofacial panels. We'll be using bifacial. So there's no film and no concern about PFAS or Gen X chemicals in solar panels. We've heard questions about electromagnetic radiation or electromagnetic fields. All electronics have electromagnetic fields. The difference is solar panels are very low voltage. Like I said, it collects low voltage current. So the panels really don't have a large electromagnetic field, significantly smaller than you would see on like a transmission line. We have robust studies that show that the electromagnetic fields are safe. In fact, we've submitted an appendix, the NC State Health and Safety Impacts of Photovoltaics. It covers all of those studies and says that outside of a fence line, you can't even, that we're no different than background radiation levels, background electromagnetic frequency levels, which is 2,000 times lower than the regulated limit. So there's no concern for electromagnetic radiation. We put these panels on top of hospitals. We put them on top of houses. We have people working on these sites all day, every day. Electromagnetic frequency just isn't a concern. We have a lot of questions about panel durability. These panels are extremely durable. They're made with dual pane tempered glass that is very difficult to break. They're very difficult to break. And even in the event of an extreme break, it wouldn't shatter and shed a bunch of glass. It stays in one piece. It stays in one piece and it doesn't leach any materials. It stays in one piece, and we would know as soon as something broke. We have very robust operations and maintenance standards. So we routinely visually inspect the panels. We routinely thermally and infrared inspect the panels. We would go out there and we would fix anything that's broke. They're monitored 24/7 remotely. So we would know, hey, we're not getting energy from this section. Somebody go out there and check on it. And if you can't see it with your eyes, bring the thermal drone out there or whatever we use, bring the thermal camera out there, find out which one of these panels is broken. And I guess a small comment on that is a tiny broken panel is really not a concern. Like I said, when I say we're underneath the EPA regulated limits, when the EPA tests these panels, they take them and they grind them to a pulp, literally grind them to a pulp, to a fine sand. They wash it in an acid bath, and then they test that water and see if you can even find any lead in there. And oftentimes they can't. So when I say a cracked panel isn't a big deal, I really mean it. They're safe. I had a lot of questions last time about the wind loading of a panel. I know that there were a lot of great questions about that last time I presented. So I went and I looked up the local regulation. 120 miles an hour is what the panels have to withstand in this area. Duke would apply some sort of safety factor to that, likely about 140 miles an hour, which is a pretty robust wind loading. So they're pretty safe. I've talked on fire safety a little bit. We met with the chief. The other thing, the panels are no inherent fire risk all by themselves. They are not flammable. There's no inherent fire risk to the panels. And like I said, if they were to catch fire, we would know immediately. It's monitored 24/7. So we would know if there was an issue. We would know if something wasn't generating. I've talked about the AMA already, so I'll skip over I'll answer any questions anybody has about the AMA and grading and drain tile. I'll touch once again on flooding. The flooding we expect to be reduced. Well, not we expect it. The American Society of Civil Engineers has released a full study on this and said that if you put a solar panel out and you cover it with grassland prairie, you will see a reduction in flooding from row crop. So you will see a reduction in erosion, you will see a reduction in flooding, and we plan on proving that when we submit our hydrological study we plan on proving that when we submit our final engineering at the building permit level. We've talked about decommissioning. I can answer any questions anybody has about decommissioning. A lot of people have questions about recycling. These panels are very recyclable. Most of the site is steel, which is incredibly recyclable. Glass and aluminum are recyclable, and the PV industry is developing a very robust recycling industry. In fact, Duke Energy funds a lot of research into making the panels recyclable. Some panels are up to 91% recyclable today. So we expect that to only improve as time goes on, particularly at the end of the life of this project, 35 to 40 years.
Will the project be constructed or built in a floodplain?
Absolutely not.
I have nothing further.
All right, that going to do it for tonight, folks. I'm sure everybody probably agrees with that. It's almost 9:30. We will recess until We will recess until Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, the 12th of October at the hour of 6 PM here in the old Lee County Courthouse. Everybody have a good weekend.
Get it every day. I just get so excited about this.